Title of the first section today is Review, Adding Fractions. In this section, we'll review how to add two fractions together. Two definitions or two steps for these questions. First step is must have common denominators. And the second step, to add fractions, reduce when possible. When adding fractions, we have to have the same or common denominator, which means the bottom number of the fractions will both be the same. And when we add fractions, we can reduce the fractions or reduce the answer when possible. First question, and first two fractions, 3 over 4 plus 7 over 4. Adding fractions again must have the same common denominators, or the bottom number must be the same. In this case, they're already the same, so our answer would be the same denominator, which would be 4, and the numerators we can add together, 3 plus 7 would be 10. Keep in mind to reduce when possible, 10 over 4. To reduce fractions, you want to divide the numerator and denominator by the same number. In this case, we can divide both the numerator and denominator by 2. 10 divided by 2 would be 5, and 4 divided by 2 would be 2. So 10 over 4 reduces to our answer, and the answer would be 5 over 2, or 5 halves. Second question, 1/2 plus 2/3. Again, adding fractions, first step, we must have the same denominator or common denominators. If they're different denominators, we must multiply one or both fractions to make them the same. A common denominator would be a number that 2 divides into and also 3 divides into. What we can do on this question is make the common denominator 6. And again, 2 will divide into 6 and 3 will divide into 6, so our common denominator would be 6. To change the first fraction to a 6, we have to figure out which number we're multiplying 2 by to get 6. In this case, it would be 2 times 3 would be 6. The top number numerator multiplied by that same number, so 1 times 3 would be 3. So 1/2 is the same as 3 over 6. Changing the second fraction, 2 over 3. Again, 3 times the number would be 6. That number would be 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Multiplying the numerator by that same number, 2 times 2 would be 4. So 2 over 3 is the same as 4 over 6. After changing denominators, we can add the fractions together. The common denominator 6 would stay the same, and adding the numerators 3 plus 4 would be 7. So our final answer, which cannot be reduced, is 7 over 6. Next question for the section, 5 over 9 plus 2 over 12. Again, adding fractions, the first step is to get the common denominator. A common denominator will be a number that 9 divides into and 12 divides into. You could multiply 9 times 12 to get a common denominator. Sometimes, though, there's a smaller denominator rather than multiplying the two. If you think about the numbers 9 and 12, both of those divide into 36. So the lowest common denominator, or common denominator we'll use for this problem, will be 36. 9 times 4 would be 36. So we'll multiply the numerator and denominator by 4. So the numerator 4 times 5 would be 20. 12 times 3 would be 36. So the numerator 2 times 3 would be 6 over 36. Once we have the same denominator or common denominator over 36, we can add the numerators 20 plus 6, which would be 26. Check into reduced fractions. 26 and 36. We can divide each of these by 2. And our final answer would be 26 divided by 2, which is 13, and 36 divided by 2, which is 18. So our final answer would be 13 over 18. Last question for the section. First fraction we'll have is a mixed number, 3 and 4/5, plus a second mixed number, 2 and 7/10. Mixed numbers have a number in front and a fraction, so we have a whole number and a fraction after. In order to add mixed numbers together, we want to change it first into an improper fraction, which means we'll have one fraction without the number in front. If you remember from previous sections, we can change a mixed number into an improper fraction by first multiplying the number times the denominator, and then we'll add the numerator. So 3 and 4/5 we can change to 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 4 more would be 19, and the denominator would stay the same. So 3 and 4/5 is the same as 19/5, or 19 over 5. Second mixed number, again we can take the whole number in front, multiply it by the denominator, and then we'll add the numerator. So 2 times 10 would be 20, plus 7 more would be 27, and again the denominator 10 would stay the same. So instead of 3 and 4/5 plus 2 and 7/10, we can change it to 19/5 plus 27/10. Same steps as before we add fractions, we want the common denominator. The denominators of 5 and 10. To get a common denominator, we can actually just multiply the first number by 2, and that will give us a common denominator of 10. Keep in mind we'll multiply the numerator by 2 also. 2 times 19 would be 38, and 2 times 5 would be 10. The second fraction will keep the same, 27 over 10. And with common denominators, we can just add the numerators. 38 plus 27 would be 65 over the same denominator, 10. Keep in mind we want to reduce fractions when possible. If we have 65 and 10, we can divide each of those by 5. 65 divided by 5 would be 13, and 10 divided by 5 would be 2. So our final answer is 13 over 2, or 13/2. Title of the last section today is Review, Subtracting, Fractions. In this section, we'll subtract 2 fractions. 2 definitions or 2 steps for subtracting fractions. First step is must have common denominators. And second definition or second step is reduce fractions. Same steps as adding fractions. When you subtract fractions, we have to have the same or common denominators, and then always reduce fractions when possible. First question and first two fractions. Negative 6 over 11 minus 5 over 11. Subtracting fractions when you have these same denominators. Again, the denominator would stay the same. Combining the numerators, we'll have negative 6 minus 5. Negative 6 minus 5 would be negative 11. Both the numbers will have a minus sign, so we'll add those and keep the negative. Reducing or dividing fractions, negative 11 divided by 11 would be negative 1. So our final answer, negative 1. Second question, 3 over 2 minus 1/3. Again, before we subtract fractions, we have to have the same or common denominators. If we have a 2 and a 3, the common denominator that we could use would be 6, since 2 divides into 6 and 3 divides into 6. Changing the first fraction to a 6, we can multiply the denominator and numerator by 3. 3 times 3 would be 9, and 2 times 3 would be 6. Changing the second fraction, we can multiply the denominator and numerator by 2. 1 times 2 would be 2, and 3 times 2 would be 6. So changing the question to 9 over 6 minus 2 over 6, the denominator again would stay the same, and subtracting 9 minus 2 would be 7. So our final answer would be 7 over 6. Next question for the section. Negative 7 over 8 minus, in parentheses, negative 2 over 5. This question we have a negative fraction minus a negative fraction. If you remember from previous sections, we have a minus minus with no numbers in between, just a single parentheses. Whenever you subtract a negative or minus minus, we can change both of those to addition signs. So the question is now negative 7 over 8 plus 2 over 5. Still getting common denominators between the two fractions. If we have a 8 and a 5, common denominator would be 40. So the first fraction we can multiply by 5. 5 times 7 would be 35. Since the fraction is negative, this would be a negative 35. And 5 times 8 would be 40. The second fraction we can multiply by 8. 2 times 8 would be 16. And 5 times 8 would be 40. Once we have the same denominators, again the 40 we can bring over. Combining the numerators, negative 35 plus 16. Since we have different signs, a negative 35 and a positive 16, we'll be subtracting 35 minus 16, which will be 19. And 35, the bigger number is negative, so we'll have a negative 19. So our final answer, negative 19 over 40. And last question for the section. We'll have a mixed number, 4 and 2/5, minus another mixed number, 5 and 1/3. Mixed numbers again, we can first change into improper fractions. Again, we'll take the number in front, multiply it by the denominator, and then we'll add the numerator. So 4 times 5 would be 20, plus 2 more would be 22, and the denominator 5 would stay the same. Minus 5 and 1/3 would be 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 more is 16, so we'll have 16 over 3. Solving from here, we want common denominators between 5 and 3. The common denominator for 5 and 3 would be 15. So the first fraction, we can multiply the numerator and denominator by 3. 3 times 22 would be 66. And the second fraction, we can multiply the numerator and denominator by 5. 16 times 5 would be 80. And 3 times 5 would be 15. Once we have these same denominators, the denominator would be the same. And we'll have 66 minus 80. We can take the bigger number 80 and subtract 66, which would be 14. And the bigger number 80 has a minus or negative sign, so our answer would be negative 14. Our final answer, negative 14 over 15.